the way I view sectarianism is it's to do with bullying, and it's to do with antisocial behaviour. Often, you know, in groups, particularly groups of young people, particularly young men, see difference as threatening, or difference as something to be bullied or attacked. Now that could be apparent differences in sexuality, or being from the wrong part of town, or, you know, being of a different race, or being from Inverness or something like that. If you move to Glasgow, maybe people think, oh, they speak funny and whatnot. And I think sectarianism falls into that. It's a bit of bigotry and a bit of bullying, and it's fostered by group experiences of wanting to see difference and not to like the other lot.
I think a lot of young guys go along and sing these songs, and they know all the words to the songs because they've maybe been taught them by older brothers or by fathers or uncles or whoever, or they've picked it up from their mates, but actually they've no idea what most of them mean, you know. And if you start talking to them about historical events in Ireland, they've actually got very little knowledge about it.
I think there's a general ignorance in Scotland of Scottish history. I don't think we as a society are particularly well served in our education by a nuanced understanding of Scottish history, and I think sectarianism demonstrates that kind of very vague, very selective view of what history is like, and misses an awful lot of rather positive things to say about the Catholic and Protestant experience in Scotland.
I suspect that the people who respond to these kind of things respond to Catholics out there or Protestants out there, but it makes curiously little difference on the ground, which is a very strange thing in itself. So that people who are neighbours across the landing will still respond to each other and each other's needs in precisely the same way as they have always done. So they go for their Catholic neighbours' paper, they go for their milk, they take them in soup when they're not well, and the actual strengths of person to person still exist beyond these formal contexts in which they appear to be divided.
I think what we need to do is look at wider issues in society, you know, and I think it's a political issue. The fact that sectarianism has come so much to the fore in recent times, because I don't think, and actually any of the problems are particularly worse than they've ever been. And I think there's a whole range of other issues that are being ignored. For instance, you know, issues to do with violence, the root causes of that violence, which is social disadvantage, poverty, deprivation, and I think these things need to be addressed first and foremost.
There is quite a strong sectarian divide here, but it's much more complex than it seems on the surface, because there are formal divisions, and where you see it is Orange Lodge parades, or the Catholic equivalent, which is the Knights of St Columba. You know, you sometimes see them parading as well. And those formal processes can be quite damaging of community and community reputation.
There's a really striking statistic in that there are more Orange marches in Glasgow every year than there are in London, Derry and Belfast combined. Now, that to me is quite incredible, that there is such a high level of the public display of Orange Order parades. I think if I was a Catholic in the west of Scotland, then my perception of sectarianism would be very, very high indeed, because between March and October there would be marches routinely. Now, no one, I think, wants to ban such marches because they are an expression of opinion, but I think most people in Glasgow, the council, the mainstream churches and the police would like to see rather fewer of these marches. So the right to march, the right to assemble is crucial, but also there is the rights of the rest of Glasgow and the west of Scotland to go about their business. And I think maybe the time has come to think very seriously about how those could be limited in a way that doesn't limit the freedom of expression of the Orange movement.
I think people sing songs and enjoy singing songs for lots of reasons. One of them is social bonding, and songs are used all over the world for building group cohesion and a group identity. I think people sing songs like at football and at the weekends as a way to relax and show their sense of belonging to the group that they go about with. So we know about how mobs work, which is the identity of the individual is submerged within the group. We know that when people put on certain uniforms, their identity can change as well. So yes, I think it would be certainly this context specificity that would be a factor in when you say sectarian songs. A lot of these songs are traced back to the conflict in Northern Ireland, so they're linked to the Troubles and the real civil war that happened.
There already exists plenty of laws under which these things should have been tackled. If 1,000, let's be kind, if 1,000 people gathered in a cinema in Glasgow to sing songs about how they hated Jews or Muslims and how they'd like to be wading up to their knees in their blood, the cinema would be closed down. It would lose its license to operate. And the same thing is true of a football ground. If criminality, which hate crime is very definitely part of the corpus of criminality, is taking place in a publicly licensed space, the license issuer has a responsibility to threaten and, if necessary, carry out the withdrawal of the license.
I think I wouldn't think it's far-fetched to argue that if children are in that audience and young people in that audience and they hear that chanting, those type of songs whose origins were in civil and military conflict, that will be something they can walk away from in daily life. It will, I would imagine, have an effect on the growing up. Yeah.
I read a piece at the weekend by a reformed Rangers fan who described how he used to go to Ibrox and sing "We Are the Billy Boys" with his father and his uncles, until one moment he realised that he had a Catholic girlfriend and Catholic friends, and he didn't actually want to wade up to his knees in their blood. And he saw the light, as it were. But the fact that a father and his brothers with this small boy could take such relish in such bloody sectarian vainglory shows in a nutshell how it's passed down from father to son. And you know, it's not hard to see why. I went through Bridgeton Cross on Saturday night in a car at speed because I wouldn't walk through it. But the people that are living at Bridgeton Cross don't have much to be feeling superior about. Just like the poor whites on the wrong side of the tracks in Mississippi in the early 60s had nothing much to feel superior about. But they did feel superior to the black people living there. And the people at Bridgeton Cross feel superior to the Catholics who are living in almost identical poverty and poverty of expectation as them. That's what sectarianism and racism does.
The common thread here is not sectarianism, the common thread here is alcohol. And I don't mean to be trite, but I think that if you looked at domestic abuse around things like the Eurovision Song Contest or the X Factor final, where people are getting together and drinking a lot, you might actually find a modest spike there. Nothing to do with sectarianism at all, everything to do with a potent mixture of getting drunk and having arguments with your loved ones.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, when you put alcohol into the equation and the toxic mix of the Old Firm fixture and too much alcohol among some not just young people but all, you know, fans, it can lead to aggression. And I mean, there has been links, you know, between domestic violence and increases in the day of old firm games. And I think to some extent, you know, that definitely happens. But there again, there's an awful lot of other fans that just go along to the matches and maybe sing the songs or engage in a bit of banter and then forget about it afterwards.
I don't think it's related to things like alcohol so much as the need in very poor communities to feel that you are important and that you have something special that someone else doesn't have. And also fear over that was promulgated over a long period of time. Even in the early 20th century, in churches of Scotland, they were worried about the number of Catholics being born because the dominance of Protestant culture was so important to them. And in the churches, they were still preaching about the anxiety related to the number of Catholic births, which is, when you look at it now, it's hideously embarrassing that the church was ever concerned with such things.
I see it as part of a culture of, you know, belonging, a culture of togetherness, culture of fitting in, and not a deep knowledge of it, and more a knowledge that's passed on through word of mouth.
I think there are many factors which cause it. The fear of changes in your society that you have no control over. Because I think that initially the kind of organisations that we associate with sectarianism thought that they were defending the constitution, a way of life. So that is still present. There is also the fact that they fear the other, the person who is different. And that, you must remember, was a great deal easier to do in the days before television, when you can turn on the television now and see songs of praise that comes from a Catholic church on South Uist. You can actually see that it's not that terribly different from what you would see in a standard Protestant church. People have been abroad. You know, they've gone to services in Spain or in Italy, and so the whole idea of people being other and doing things wrong and doing things in the way that you don't approve of, it's still present, but it's received quite a serious knock on the head, simply because people know more. And that, I think, makes a difference as well. But the other factor is this one I'm talking about, the need for people to feel special when their lives were very hard and very bleak. And so you belong to something, and in that something you become an important person. You are an office bearer, and it is a very important way that people express themselves. And I think if we forget that and see it simply as bigotry, then we actually undervalue the people who put their time into it, and undervalue their whole understanding of self. So it's a matter that requires great sensitivity, I think.
I think the issue of violence per se needs to be addressed, you know, and the kind of narrow views among a lot of young men still in the west of Scotland about what masculinity is all about. You know, it's about going out and having a fight. You know, it's about showing aggression and all the rest of it. I think some of these views need to be challenged. And I think sometimes some of those things are more important than addressing some of the issues at football grounds.
Absolutely. I think the best way to tackle sectarianism is to tackle bigotry, prejudice and bullying, and to tackle the kind of antisocial behaviour that's all too prevalent in Scotland. Scotland has a problem with alcohol, it has a problem with violent crime, and in particular has a problem with young men who carry blades and kill each other. That to me is Scotland's shame. Within that culture, though, there are certain kinds of subcultures, if you like, within it. Racist subcultures, whereby people would attack someone else on the basis of the colour of their skin, for example. And sectarianism is also a subculture within that.
Certainly, I mean, I've found that racism is a huge problem, you know, particularly, I mean, I've worked with young asylum seekers and refugees that experience racist incidents and hate crime based on their colour and their culture. And I would agree with you that that's probably more of an issue, you know, the sectarianism is, but it seems to not fit into the current political agenda to the same extent.
The racial aggravated crimes runs at almost 6 or 7 times per year to the religious aggravated crimes. They're also, it goes beyond the numbers though, because about 80 to 90% of the sectarian crime is breach of the peace. This is drunk men singing songs and abusing police officers and getting arrested for it. So it's antisocial behaviour on the street by and large. Most of the racial aggravation crimes, however, are harassment of individuals and families. So on the one side in sectarian crime, there isn't actually a person normally being attacked or abused. The racist crime there is. There are families, there are businesses, there are individuals being physically attacked, harassed in the streets. So you're right, actually to me that is much more shameful and a much more worrying level than the sectarian crime. However, you can't tie race in Scotland into particular cultural institutions that will sell newspapers. Sectarianism, however, you have an inbuilt market, if you like, that if you have, let's say, sectarian shame of a Rangers player, football fans are going to buy that. They want to find out which Rangers player it is. Celtic fans are going to buy it because they want to show that this shows that, you know, the Rangers are terrible. Rangers fans will want to buy it because they'll want to see the bias in the media, and people like me will buy it because I want to know it. If you were to and you could turn that around, that's not picking on Rangers, you could have, you know, the sectarian shame of a Celtic player exactly the same. The Old Firm sells newspapers. Race doesn't sell newspapers. So to me, you're absolutely right. Scotland's shame, such as it is the fact that whilst we congratulate ourselves in being a modern, forward-looking society in which everyone's welcome and we're all Jock Tamson's bairns, actually in our society we have lots of evidence of the small number of Scots who are invisible minorities are routinely putting up with harassment and abuse and violence.
I think the word might be a word that has become used in an obsessive way. I mean, when I look at the results of research I did with a colleague, 2 separate colleagues, one on intermarriage and one on young people in territory in Glasgow, these systematic studies found little or no evidence for sectarianism. So it does seem to be a disconnected world, that world of formal scientific-based research where you're not trying to prove any particular thing when you go in or at the end, compared with the political culture and seeing labels on police jackets of anti-sectarian initiative. You just wonder what is the evidence base that is being used for that much more high profile thing, because we certainly didn't find it in either in the census data, which is quite recent, nor did we find it in the qualitative research. Yeah.
One of the things I've been out with Nilbamouth when they've been delivering some of their exercises with young people in secondary schools, and what I've found is that a lot of the youngsters, you know, the activity maybe starts off with a brainstorming initiative where the youngsters brainstorm all the words that they know connected to sectarianism, and they talk about Huns and Tims and Fenians and all the rest of it. But when they're asked what they mean, they've no idea. And in one case, I remember some of the youngsters we were talking to, when we asked them what a Catholic was, they had no idea. You know, they were saying things like, "Oh, is it a Jew?" You know, and they had no idea that Protestants and Catholics were both Christians. You know. And they had no idea where the word Hun or Tim had come from, what it meant. So it's just really banter, you know, that's passed around. but they don't really know what it means. And I think that teachers, youth workers, people that work with young people need to continue to challenge that and at least educate them so they do know what the words mean.
So people, I think, learn about sectarianism through the media rather than through their own experience. And the problem with that is media are always quite naturally looking for headlines, looking for sensation, and bad news sells. So, you know, good news of, let's say, some of the initiatives that football clubs or churches or other groups do, or campaigning groups will do around sectarianism, that's not worth a front page headline. But if you get a conflict on the football pitch or an argument between political leaders over that, that's good. You know, that's for newspapers. That's good news because bad news sells. So in a sense, people are now, I think, becoming worried about sectarianism because all they ever hear is bad news about Catholics and Protestants in Scotland, despite all the good stuff that's actually happening.
You have to measure a society by how it protects its minorities. I mean, the number of gay people in the country compared to the number of straight people is, well, I don't know the statistics, but let's say it's 10% and 90%. The 90% are judged rightly by the environment that they preside over, in which the 10% can live their lives as they wish to live them. And it's not the 10%'s fault if people attack them because of the way God made them. And the same is true when viewing this. If this country has pretensions to be, as it seems to do, be an independent, democratic European state, well, it better get its act together on this question, or it will be a state of disrepute.